When Greta Vanderhorn whispered to her shy rancher husband, "I'm your wife. Can I suck it?" Thornton Calloway trembled so hard he couldn't stand. His calloused hands gripped his hat, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the dusty ground, because he still couldn't believe a woman like her would kneel before a man like him. This giant mail-order bride, fuller-figured, stronger, and more woman than any lady in Dustwood, Montana, knelt in the dust of their ranch, her bonnet framing a smile so radiant it could melt winter ice. She looked up at him with fierce devotion while he stood frozen, suspenders tight across his lean frame, face flushed with shame and longing he'd buried for 14 years. Thornton was the shy rancher every woman in 3 counties had rejected. Too quiet, too awkward, too broken by the beauty who'd called him half a man in front of the whole town dance hall. He'd ordered a mail-order bride, not from hope, but from bone-deep resignation, expecting someone as desperate and damaged as himself. But Greta's hands reached for his belt with gentle confidence, her smile never wavering, joy radiating from every inch of her powerful frame. She wasn't asking his permission anymore. After 3 months of marriage where he couldn't meet her eyes, where he ate his meals in silence and fled to the barn like a frightened boy, this beautiful woman had decided she was done waiting for her husband to believe he deserved to be loved. She was claiming what was hers. His knees buckled, his hand flew to steady himself against the barn wall as tears streamed down his weathered face. When this giant mail-order bride did what she promised, when she loved him the way only a true wife can, the shy rancher trembled, shook, and wept like a man being pulled from a grave he'd been buried in alive. In that moment, as her massive, gentle hands held him steady and her lips showed him devotion no woman had ever given him, Thornton Calloway forgot every woman who ever rejected him. He forgot Sarah Pritchard's cruel laughter. He forgot 14 years of loneliness. He forgot the word half had ever been attached to man when people spoke of him, because this giant mail-order bride saw him whole. But how did a shy rancher who couldn't look a woman in the eye end up with this radiant woman kneeling in the dust before him, claiming him with joy instead of duty? Why did Greta, fuller, stronger, more alive than any woman he'd ever seen, choose to kneel for the man the whole town pitied? What happened in those 3 agonizing months of marriage before she finally stopped asking permission and started taking what was rightfully hers? And what broke inside both of them that made this moment not just desire, but redemption? This is the story of the shy rancher who trembled at love, and the giant mail-order bride who taught him he was never broken at all, just waiting for someone strong enough to see him clearly. 3 months earlier, the train hissed into Dustwood Station like a metal dragon spitting steam into the September sky. Thornton Calloway stood on that wooden platform with his hat crushed between his shaking hands, staring at his boots like they held the answers to questions he was too terrified to ask. The telegram in his vest pocket felt like a stone against his ribs. Bride arriving Thursday. Stop Greta Vanderhorn, stop. He'd written those letters to the marriage agency in the dead of night when loneliness carved holes so deep in his chest he thought he might disappear into them. 38 years old, and he'd never kissed a woman, never held hands walking down Main Street, never woken up to someone's breath on his neck. The ranch hands whispered about him. The town ladies clucked their tongues in pity. And Sarah Pritchard. God, Sarah Pritchard had made sure everyone knew exactly what she thought of Thornton Calloway. He was 14 years younger then, standing in the Dustwood dance hall with sweat soaking through his Sunday shirt. He'd practiced the words for 3 weeks. "Miss Pritchard, may I have this dance?" But when he finally walked up to her, his tongue turned to clay, and the stutter that his father had beaten him for came roaring back. Miss P. Pritchard, can I?" She didn't even let him finish. She laughed, high and sharp like glass breaking, and her voice carried across that entire hall. "I don't dance with half a man, Thornton Calloway." Her friends giggled behind their fans. The fiddler stopped playing. Every eye in that room burned into him while he stood there, frozen, drowning in his own humiliation. After that night, women looked through him like he was smoke. The pretty ones, the plain ones, even the desperate widows looking for help with their farms. Nobody wanted the man who couldn't finish a sentence without his words, stumbling over themselves like drunken cattle. So he stopped trying. He worked his ranch alone, ate his meals alone, and told himself that some men just weren't made for love. That loneliness was easier than rejection, that he was fine, just fine, completely fine with a life that stretched ahead of him like an empty road disappearing into nothing. But the nights. God, the nights were killers. He'd lie in his narrow bed and listen to the wind howl through the gaps in the walls and wonder what it felt like to have someone's warmth next to you, to hear another heartbeat in the darkness, to matter enough to someone that they'd choose to stay. That's why he'd written those letters, not because he thought he deserved love, but because the silence was eating him alive from the inside out. Now, the train doors opened and passengers stepped down into the afternoon light. A drummer with his sample cases, a circuit preacher with a Bible under his arm, a family with 3 children who immediately started fighting over who got to carry the carpet bag. Then she appeared. Greta Vanderhorn descended those train steps, and the entire platform went silent. She stood at least 6 feet 4 inches tall in her traveling boots, broader in the shoulders than the blacksmith, with a frame that spoke of hard work and harder winters. Her dress was simple gray cotton that strained across her full figure, and her face, handsome more than pretty, with strong cheekbones and a jaw that could take a punch, scanned the crowd with something that looked like defiance, mixed with terror. Their eyes met across 20 feet of wooden planks and dusty air. Thornton felt his stomach drop into his boots. She was magnificent, powerful, more woman than he'd ever imagined could exist in one body. And she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or fear, or something suspended between the two. Then he saw himself through her eyes. A lean, weathered man of 38, who looked older, because loneliness ages you faster than sun and work combined. Shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. Eyes that couldn't hold another person's gaze for more than 3 seconds before shame made him look away. He saw her shoulders drop just slightly, saw disappointment flicker across her face before she smoothed it into something polite and neutral. She thought he was disappointed in her. He thought she was disappointed in him. Neither of them knew they were both wrong. Greta walked toward him carrying a single battered trunk that looked like it had crossed the country twice and might not survive a third journey. She moved carefully, like someone used to making themselves smaller in spaces that weren't built for bodies like hers. When she reached him, she set down the trunk and extended her hand. It was easily twice the size of his, with calluses that told stories of hard labor and harder survival. "Mr. Calloway?" Her voice surprised him. It was gentle, almost musical, like water moving over smooth stones, nothing like the rough, mannish voice he'd expected from a woman her size. Yes, ma'am." The stutter emerged immediately, sharp and mortifying. He heard snickers from the men loitering by the station house. Old shame flooded his veins like poison. Her grip was firm but careful, like she was afraid of crushing his bones. "I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. I'm Greta Vanderhorn." "Pleased to meet you too, soon to be Mrs." He couldn't finish. His tongue tied itself in knots while his face burned hot enough to fry eggs on. Behind them, he heard Randy Cooper's voice carry across the platform. Christ almighty, he ordered himself a grizzly bear and a dress. Laughter erupted from the group of ranch hands who'd come to town for supplies and stayed for the entertainment. Greta's hand went limp in his. Her shoulders hunched inward like she'd been struck. She pulled her hand back and looked down at the dusty planks, and Thornton saw something in her face that he recognized from his own mirror every single morning. Shame so deep it had carved permanent lines into the soul. "Your trunk," he managed, his words coming out clearer when anger cut through the fear. "I'll get your trunk." He hefted it, expecting it to be heavy, but not expecting it to feel like she'd packed nothing but rocks and regret. The 12-mile ride to his ranch passed in silence so thick it felt like drowning. The wagon creaked. The horses' hooves clopped against the hard-packed dirt road. The September sun beat down on them like a hammer against an anvil, and neither of them said a single word because they were both too busy trying not to cry. When they finally reached his ranch, Greta looked at the small wooden house with its sagging porch and patched roof like it was the finest mansion in San Francisco. "It's real nice," she said softly. "Real nice, Mr. Calloway." "Just Thorne," he said. "Everyone calls me Thorne." "Thorne," she tested the name on her tongue. "That's a good, strong name." Nobody had ever called anything about him strong before. The circuit preacher arrived an hour later, smelling of whiskey and desperation. He was a thin man with watery eyes who performed marriages for $5 and asked no questions about whether the couple had ever spoken more than 10 words to each other. He mumbled through the ceremony while Greta and Thornton stood 3 feet apart in the small parlor that still smelled like the bachelor coffee and loneliness that had soaked into the walls for 15 years. "Do you, Thornton Calloway, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I did do. And do you, Greta Vanderhorn, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Her voice was steady and clear, like she was making a promise she intended to keep even if it killed her. Then by the power vested in me by the Montana Territory and the grace of God, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride. They stood there, frozen, while the preacher waited with his hand already extended for his payment. Finally, Thornton leaned forward and pressed his lips to Greta's cheek so quickly it barely counted as contact. Her skin was warm and smelled like train soot and lavender soap. The preacher took his $5 and left. Husband and wife stood in that small parlor while the sun set outside and painted the sky the color of bruises. I can sleep in the bee barn, Thornton stammered. You can have the bee bedroom. It's not much, but the mattress is clean and— That's very kind of you, Greta interrupted gently. Very kind indeed. So that's what they did. That first night and every night after. Thornton slept in the barn while Greta slept in their bedroom. They were married in the eyes of God in the Montana Territory, but they lived like strangers, boarding in the same house. The days developed a rhythm that felt more like a funeral march than a marriage. Thornton would wake before dawn and slip into the house to make coffee, then disappear to work the ranch before Greta came to the kitchen. She'd make breakfast and leave his plate warming on the stove, then go outside to tackle whatever work needed doing. And there was always work. Fences that needed mending, animals that needed feeding, a roof that leaked in 3 places, a barn door that hung crooked on broken hinges. Greta attacked it all with quiet competence that left Thornton slack-jawed with amazement. She could lift feed sacks that normally took 2 men to carry. She gentled his most ornery horse with nothing but patience and soft words. She climbed up on that leaking roof and patched it better than he ever could have, moving with surprising grace for someone her size. He'd watch her from a distance, wanting to help, wanting to talk to her, wanting to know everything about the woman he'd married. But every time he got close, his throat closed up and his hands started shaking, and all he could hear was Sarah Pritchard's voice echoing across 14 years. Half a man. How could he approach someone as capable and strong as Greta when he couldn't even manage to speak a full sentence without his words tripping over themselves? So he stayed away. He ate his meals at odd hours so they wouldn't have to sit together. He worked the far pastures even when the work didn't need doing. He lay in the barn at night and hated himself for being too broken to claim the wife he'd paid good money to bring all the way from Minnesota. And Greta? She worked from sunup to sundown, her body moving with the kind of desperate energy that comes from trying to outrun your own thoughts. She scrubbed floors that were already clean. She reorganized the small pantry 3 times in 1 week. She baked bread and left it on the table where Thornton would find it, still warm, with butter melting into the crust. She was trying. God, she was trying so hard to be a good wife, to earn her place, to prove she was worth the trouble of bringing her here. But at night, alone in that bedroom that smelled like her husband but never held him, she'd press her face into the pillow and cry as silently as she could. Because she understood now. She understood with perfect, devastating clarity. Thornton Calloway had ordered a mail-order bride out of loneliness and desperation. But when she'd stepped off that train, all 6 feet 4 inches of her, broad and powerful and completely wrong, he'd realized his mistake. He was too polite to send her back, too kind to tell her the truth. So instead, he was trying to pretend she didn't exist. She was too much. She'd always been too much. And now she was trapped 2,000 miles from home with a man who couldn't bear to look at her. 3 months. 3 months of this torture. 3 months of living as strangers. 3 months of wanting someone so close you could hear them breathe through the walls, but never touching, never talking, never connecting. Something had to break. Someone had to be brave. Because this wasn't a marriage. It was a slow death by loneliness for 2 people who'd already been dying alone for years. What neither of them knew was that the breaking point was coming, arriving on the wings of a December blizzard that would trap them together and force them to finally see what had been right in front of them all along. The blizzard hit on a Tuesday in early December with the kind of violence that made old-timers shake their heads and mutter about the winter of '71 when half the territory froze to death. The sky turned the color of iron, the wind started screaming like a woman in labor, and the temperature dropped so fast the water in the horse trough froze solid in under an hour. Thornton was checking the far pasture when the first flakes started falling. He knew immediately he'd made a terrible mistake. The cattle were already bunching together, their instincts telling them death was coming on the wind. He tried to drive them toward the near barn, but they scattered in panic, and by the time he got half of them moving in the right direction, he couldn't see 10 feet in front of his face. The world turned white. Not the soft, gentle white of a Christmas card, but a blinding, hostile white that erased everything. The ranch house disappeared. The barn disappeared. The ground beneath his feet disappeared until he was stumbling through an endless void of howling wind and stinging ice. He didn't know he'd fallen through the creek ice until the water hit him like 1,000 knives. The shock drove the air from his lungs. His right leg twisted beneath him and he heard something crack, not loud like a gunshot, but quiet and definitive, like a door closing that you'll never open again. The pain came next, white-hot and nauseating. He tried to stand and his leg folded like paper. The creek wasn't deep, maybe 3 feet, but he couldn't climb the icy bank. His hands were already going numb. His teeth chattered so hard he thought they might shatter. This is how I die, he thought with strange clarity. Alone in a frozen creek while my wife sleeps in a house 200 yards away, and she'll probably feel relieved when she finds my body. But then he heard her voice cutting through the storm like a church bell through fog. Thornton Calloway, where are you? He tried to answer, but his throat wouldn't work. His whole body was shaking so violently he couldn't control his muscles. He was shutting down, piece by piece, system by system. Thorn! Closer now. She was getting closer. He managed a sound, barely human, more like an animal caught in a trap. But it was enough. Greta appeared above him like an angel of mercy in a world gone mad, her bonnet long since blown away, her hair whipping around her face like a storm within the storm. She saw him in the creek and didn't hesitate for even a second. She slid down that icy bank, crashed into the water beside him, and before he could protest, before he could tell her to save herself, she'd wrapped one massive arm around his chest and was hauling him up and out like he weighed nothing at all. She carried him. All 170 pounds of shivering, broken Thornton Calloway. She carried him through that blizzard like he was a child. Her strength was terrifying and beautiful. She never stumbled, never hesitated, never once suggested she might drop him. She just put her head down and walked straight into the teeth of that storm, following some internal compass that defied the whiteout chaos. When they crashed through the kitchen door, ice hung from both their clothes like armor. Greta kicked the door shut with one boot, carried him straight to his bedroom, and laid him on the bed with surprising gentleness. Your leg, she said, all business now. No gentleness in her voice, just firm competence. Don't move it. She stripped off his frozen clothes with efficient hands that didn't linger, didn't hesitate, didn't show any embarrassment at his nakedness. She'd grown up on a farm, she'd birthed calves and stitched up horses, and knew that modesty had no place when death was sniffing at the door. She wrapped him in every quilt in the house, started a fire in the bedroom stove that she fed until it roared like a living thing, then examined his ankle with hands that were gentle despite their size. Broken, she said quietly, but clean. I can set it. You don't have to. Hush. Not unkindly, but firmly. I'm your wife, Thorn. This is what wives do. She set his ankle while he bit down on a leather belt and tried not to scream. She mixed a poultice from herbs she'd brought from Minnesota, wrapped his leg with strips torn from one of her own petticoats, and elevated it on pillows with such care that tears leaked from his eyes despite his best efforts to hold them back. Then she made coffee, laced with whiskey, and sat beside the bed while the storm raged outside, and Thornton Calloway finally looked at his wife. Really looked at her. Her hair was drying in waves around her strong face. Her dress was still damp in places, clinging to her curves. Her hands, those enormous, capable hands, rested on her knees, and he could see rope burns and calluses and old scars that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Why? His voice came out broken, but not from the stutter this time, from emotion too big to contain. Why did you come after me? Greta looked at him like he'd asked why the sun rises. Because you're my husband, Thorn. Because I'd sooner die in that storm than live in this house, knowing I let you freeze. But I've treated you like you're afraid, she finished softly. I know, I understand fear, Thorn. I've carried it my whole life. Afraid of you? He forced the words out. No, never of you. Afraid you'd see what everyone else sees. That I'm broken. That Sarah Pritchard was right. That I'm half a man. Greta's face hardened. Who's Sarah Pritchard? So he told her. Lying there in that bed with his leg throbbing and his body finally starting to warm, he told her everything. About the dance hall and the rejection. About 14 years of silence and loneliness. about the women who looked through him and the men who mocked him, and the nights when the quiet got so loud he thought about walking into the winter and not coming back. He told her about ordering a mail-order bride, not because he thought he deserved love, but because he was so desperately lonely. He was willing to risk one more rejection if it meant maybe, possibly, having someone to talk to during the long Montana winters. And then he told her the truth that hurt most of all. When you stepped off that tea train, so beautiful and strong and magnificent, I thought, she's going to take one look at me and realize what a terrible mistake she made. So I stayed away because I couldn't bear to see that in a moment when you figured out you'd traveled 2,000 miles for a man who can't even finish a sentence without stuttering. Greta was silent for a long moment. Then she started laughing. Not cruelly, not like Sarah Pritchard had laughed, but with genuine amazement. "You fool," she said, and there was affection in it. "You beautiful, ridiculous fool. Do you know what I thought when I saw you on that platform?" He shook his head. "I thought, he's disappointed. He wanted someone small and delicate, and instead he got a giant freak who's going to embarrass him in front of the whole territory." Her voice cracked. "My brothers, after Ma and Pa died, they told me I was unmarriageable. They said no man wants a wife who's bigger and stronger than he is. They said I made men feel small just by existing." She looked down at her hands. "I've spent my whole life trying to make myself smaller, hunching my shoulders, keeping my voice quiet, never showing my strength because it made people uncomfortable. And when I came here, I worked myself half to death trying to prove I was worth keeping. That maybe if I was useful enough, you wouldn't send me back." Thornton tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through his leg. Greta immediately moved to help him, adjusting the pillows behind his back. "You think you're broken?" he asked. "Greta, you're the strongest person I've ever met. And I don't mean just your body, though God knows you're strong enough to carry a full-grown man through a bee blizzard. I mean, you're brave, you're capable, you're kind. You came 2,000 many miles to marry a stranger, and you never complained once. You've worked this ranch like you've lived here your whole life. You make bay bread that tastes like heaven, and you fixed the barn door I've been avoiding for 2 years, and you—" His voice broke completely. "You're not too much. You're not a freak. You're exactly enough, and I'm the fool who was too scared to see it." Greta's eyes filled with tears. "You really mean that?" Every word. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she cupped his face with one massive, gentle hand. "I'm your wife, Thorn," she whispered, "in name so far, but I'd like to be your wife in truth, if you'll have me." His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. I don't know how to, neither have I," she smiled, and it transformed her entire face into something radiant. "We'll figure it out together." The blizzard raged for 3 more days. 3 days where they were trapped in that small house with nowhere to hide and no more excuses. 3 days where they finally talked, really talked, sharing stories and fears and dreams they'd never spoken aloud to another living soul. On the 4th night, Thornton's fever broke and he woke to find Greta asleep in the chair beside his bed, her large frame folded uncomfortably, her hand resting near his on the quilt. In sleep she looked younger, vulnerable, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. "Greta," he whispered. She startled awake. "Are you in pain? I'll fetch more." "Come here." She hesitated, uncertain, then slowly, carefully, she sat on the edge of the bed. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand trembling, but not from fear this time. "I love you," he said, clear and strong, not a single stutter. "I think I've loved you since you carried me through that storm." Her tears came then, hot and fast. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me." He kissed her. It was clumsy and sweet and perfect, and when she deepened the kiss, when her massive hands cradled his face like he was something precious and fragile, Thornton Calloway felt whole for the first time in his life. They undressed each other with shaking hands and nervous laughter. When she was bare before him, tall and strong and magnificent, he traced the muscles of her arms with wonder. "You're beautiful," he breathed. "So beautiful." Their lovemaking was tender and awkward and deeply emotional. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Greta propped herself on one elbow. Her face was flushed, vulnerable, brave. "Thorn," her voice was barely audible. Can I—" She gestured, embarrassed. "I'm your wife, can I suck it?" He went rigid with shock, but his hands found her shoulders and held on like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "You don't have to. I want to." She met his eyes with fierce devotion. "I want to make you feel good. I want to love you the way a wife loves her husband." When she did, with gentle inexperience and absolute devotion, Thornton Calloway broke. He wept, deep shaking sobs from a place he didn't know existed. He wept for every rejection, every humiliation, every lonely night. He wept for the boy whose father beat him and the man who believed he was unlovable. Greta held him afterward, this giant woman cradling him like something precious. "I love you," he choked out. "God, Greta, I love you so much." "I love you too." She kissed his tears. "You're whole, Thorn, you always were. You just needed someone strong enough to see it clearly." 2 weeks later, when the snow finally melted enough for travel, Sarah Pritchard appeared at their door. She wore a blue dress and calculated tears, but Thornton answered with Greta standing right beside him, her hand in his. "Sarah." His voice was steady, strong, no stutter at all. "What can I do for you?" "Thorn, I've been such a fool. I've come to tell you that you're the one I should have chosen, that you deserve better than this arrangement." Greta tensed beside him, but Thornton squeezed her hand and smiled. "You're right about one thing, Sarah. I do deserve better. I deserve a woman who sees me as whole, who's brave enough to love me without shame, who's strong enough to carry me through storms." He looked at Greta with such devotion it made Sarah flinch. "I deserve exactly the wife I have." He closed the door in Sarah's face. That spring, their ranch won the county's cattle competition, thanks to Greta's breeding program. The townspeople who once mocked them now brought their horses to Greta for training, and on warm evenings they'd sit on their porch. Greta in the reinforced rocking chair Thorn built for her, him at her feet with his head against her knee. "I was thinking," Greta said one evening, "we should expand, maybe breed draft horses." "Whatever you want." He kissed her palm. "Whatever you want, we'll do together." "Together," she agreed, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly that held their first child. In the distance, their cattle grazed. The ranch Thorn built alone had become the home they built together, a place where two broken people discovered they were never broken at all, just waiting for someone strong enough to see them clearly. And that's the story of Thornton and Greta Calloway, the shy rancher who trembled at love, and the giant mail-order bride who taught him he was never broken at all. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? I love seeing our community from all around the world. Drop your location and time, and let's see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe in second chances and the kind of love that sees people clearly, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will make you feel something real. Because we all deserve someone who sees us as whole, exactly as we are.